Have you ever thought to yourself, should I buy an iPad or should I buy a MacBook?
Oh, hey, they actually asked that question. We need someone to answer this question. Can we get that British guy?
Absolutely not. I will not do a comparison video of the iPad Air versus the MacBook Air. I am too busy buying the ultimate British survival guide gear to survive a night out of baked beans and fish and chips.
Someone get Greg to do it. Well, you have obviously come to the right place because Apple just released a brand new MacBook Air and a brand new iPad Air, complete with a new Magic Keyboard that makes this device more like a laptop than ever before. So this is not a ridiculous question to have, and I am the right person to answer that question by picking which device ultimately delivers the best experience, the best features, and the best value for your money. And you know as well as I do, the one thing that's hard to come by with Apple products is finding a good deal, which is why I partnered with Slick Deals to help you save money on your next Apple purchase. Slick Deals is the ultimate online community obsessed with finding you the best deals. It's over 12 million users strong, and its dedicated users and team of skilled editors ensure new savings are constantly being added to the site and that you are always getting the best deals. In fact, Slick Deals users save an average of 45% on their purchase. And let me show you by going to slickdeals.net, where I found the M2 iPad Air for $400 or 33% off, and I found the 15.3-inch M3 MacBook Air for 23% off. I can also search for older Apple products to find massive savings, and Slick Deals is a great place to search for discounted accessories for your brand new MacBook or iPad. And even if I'm not ready to buy just yet, I can set up a custom deal alert on specific products, brands, or categories to wait for the perfect price. So the next time you're looking for a good deal, head on over to Slick Deals, and thank you to Slick Deals for sponsoring this video. Now, this will primarily be a comparison between the base model of each product. For the iPad Air, this comparison will also, of course, include the new Magic Keyboard, which truly elevates the iPad experience to a true laptop alternative. Now, let's start with our first category, design. There are very different advantages to each product. Starting with the MacBook Air, this is obviously a traditional clamshell laptop design that is very thin when closed, and when you open it up, you are greeted by a full-size keyboard that is comfortable to touch on. You have Touch ID in the power button and a nice size 13.6-inch display. It is a very elegant and sleek design with a very slim and lightweight portable body that is easy to carry around. And if you're a fan of blue, it now comes in a subtle sky blue color that does look really nice. The iPad Air is a tablet form factor first, and out of the box, it is just a tablet, so a slab of aluminum and an all-screen device on the front. And it comes in, oh, wait, that's like the same sky blue color option as the M4 MacBook Air, although on Apple's website, they just refer to the iPad Air's color as blue, so not as, exciting, but I mean, it's pretty much the same color. Side by side, the iPad Air in either the 11 or 13-inch display size is much slimmer than the traditional laptop design of the MacBook Air, and it is also significantly lighter. However, when we add on the Magic Keyboard case, things change for better and for worse. So this is a brand new keyboard case for the iPad Air, which basically mimics the new Magic Keyboard we got with the iPad Pro last year, and it includes the same size key layout with function keys and the larger trackpad. The typing experience is on par with the MacBook Air's built-in laptop keyboard. However, the trackpad does feel worse than the MacBooks. First of all, it's a lot smaller, so some gestures don't feel as smooth to pull off. And secondly, it is not a haptic trackpad. The iPad Air's Magic Keyboard still uses a physical mechanism for the click, which does not feel as responsive to me as the haptic one found on the MacBook Air and iPad Pro Magic Keyboard. The other bad thing about the Magic Keyboard for the iPad Air is it adds a lot of extra weight and thickness to the Air's sleek design. The keyboard itself on both the 11 and 13-inch model weighs more than the iPad Air itself, and I guess this is one design trait that all of the Magic Keyboards have to have in order to support the floating weight of the iPad design, but it is weird how the case weighs more than the tablet itself. So while the 11-inch iPad still ends up being a lower weight and the more portable device, the 13-inch iPad Air, which has a similar screen size to the MacBook Air, actually ends up being a heavier and thicker product. Now, you may expect me to award the MacBook Air a win for the design based on this, and if I did this video last year, I probably would have. However, the one thing I have to respect about the iPad Air's design is that it takes a lot more risk. It is a more versatile form factor than a laptop. If I don't want the keyboard attached, I don't have to have it attached. I can take the iPad Air off of it and just use this as a tablet. The design, it's more exciting. The housing of the whole computer is in this thin, lightweight tablet, and that is impressive compared to a traditional laptop design. And listen, I love Apple. I love the MacBook Air. The Mac is in a great spot, but Apple has been playing it so safe with the design of MacBooks in the age of Apple Silicon, where they could actually pull off some really cutting-edge designs. The 12-inch MacBook from 10 years ago featured a lower weight and thinner body than this M4 MacBook Air. So I would love to see Apple gain back some of its courage and give us some more unique, cutting-edge MacBook designs. So that's why I'm awarding the design category to the iPad Air. It is sound, it is logical, you cannot argue with me. However, where the MacBook Air does easily come out ahead of the iPad is with the port selection, because the iPad Air only has one USB-C port, whereas the MacBook Air has two USB-C ports that are capable of faster data transfer speeds and better external display support, thanks to their Thunderbolt spec. Now, yes, the iPad Air does get a second USB-C port in the Magic Keyboard in the hinge. However, this port can only be used for charging the iPad and does not support data function. Furthermore, the MacBook Air has a dedicated MagSafe charging port, and it still has a headphone jack, whereas the iPad Air doesn't. I guess there's the courage we were looking for. Oh, but let's talk about the displays. Now, this is actually a really easy category to go over because for the most part, the MacBook Air and the iPad Air have the same exact LCD display quality with their liquid retina displays. They both have P3 wide color support. They both have True Tone technology. They both have like a similar PPI for retina displays when based on viewing distance. And they both look exactly the same, really, right next to each other. I mean, this is like a tie. Wait a minute. Okay, so yes, what I said above is true. The displays look very similar, but there is some things that do separate the displays. First of all, the MacBook Air does have a 13.6 and 15.3 inch display option, whereas the iPad Air is more limited. It only has an 11 inch and 13 inch option. However, there's something strange about that 13-inch iPad Air. It has a unique advantage over the 11-inch iPad Air and also the MacBook Airs. It strangely gets brighter than those other displays by 100 nits of display brightness. But the most important metric and the reason why the iPad wins with the smaller display sizes is because these are touchscreen displays. It opens up the iPad to more use cases than the MacBook Air, and it's easier to use on the couch for scrolling. It's easier to use for portable gaming, and it allows the iPad to use the Apple Pencil Pro. This accessory is a must-have for anyone that is planning to use their device to write or draw with, and it really does open up the capabilities of the iPad to a whole new category of professional work for artists that want to use it to draw. And so at the end of the day, the displays look similar to each other, but one you can touch, and one you cannot. The iPad Air wins. Well, what about speakers? I can't even see the speakers on the MacBook Air. There's no speaker grill ports here, and there are speaker grill ports on the iPad Air, so the iPad Air must be better. Well, this is one area where the iPad doesn't stand a chance, actually. The iPad does have a two-speaker system, and it's probably one of the weakest areas about this device overall. The sound, it just doesn't get that loud, and even at higher volumes, it just sounds flat and tinny with no real depth or bass. The MacBook Air speakers, they aren't going to win any awards, but it does have a better four-speaker sound system. It offers a richer listening experience with more depth, volume, and clarity than the ones found on the iPad Air. Now, one thing to note here is that if you're going for the bigger 15-inch MacBook Air, it actually has the best sound system out of all of these devices. It's an improved 6-speaker system with extra force-canceling woofers that definitely has more punch and clarity over the 13-inch model. However, no matter which MacBook Air you choose, it's going to easily sound better than any of the iPad Airs. Still, that doesn't mean the iPad doesn't have other advantages going for it. Things like cameras, for instance. I mean, the MacBook Air only has one. Now, yes, they're actually both the same camera. They're both a 12 megapixel center stage front camera that includes the tracking effect. However, the iPad Air also has a rear camera. And it's a pretty standard 12 megapixel camera that, sure, you're probably not going to take photos with, but it's still helpful for scanning documents or, easily flipping the camera to show someone something during a video call. Although I guess a little shout out to the MacBook Air. It does have a cool desk view mode on the center stage webcam that isn't available on the iPad Air. But still, we're overcomplicating this. As the ancient Egyptians once said, 2 cameras is better than 1. And 4 is larger than 3. That's one of the weird things about the Air's release is that the iPad Air is actually running on an older M3 chip, whereas the MacBook Air has a new M4 chip. So the iPad Air is an entire chip generation behind the MacBook Air. Thanks for making that simple, Apple. You name both the products Air and they both have different chips in them. Yes, because if you wanted to get the iPad with an M4 chip, that would actually be the iPad Pro. So with the iPad Air, you are looking at around a weaker CPU, about 20% in single core and multi-core performance, and an overall weaker GPU. Now listen, hey, in day-to-day use, the iPad Air and MacBook Air, they feel very similar to each other. But for more performance-intensive tasks like video editing, gaming, 3D modeling, rendering, the performance on the MacBook Air is going to be better. It has a faster chip. So in the performance category, you kind of have to give it to the MacBook Air. And on top of that, the MacBook Air by default comes with double the memory. It comes with 16 gigabytes memory, while every iPad Air configuration only comes with 8 gigabytes of memory. But again, let's not overcomplicate this. M4 higher than M3, MacBook Air is a better choice for performance. Now, one thing that doesn't get talked about a lot between the comparisons of these two devices is actually cellular connectivity. And I feel like that is a big omission for the MacBook Air at this point. We are on the 4th generation of Apple Silicon. These things have big batteries in them, and they're using the same exact chips as the iPads at this point. So I don't see why Apple has not implemented an optional cellular connection to make these even more portable and more freeing of being tied down to crappy coffee shop Wi-Fi connections. But yeah, this is a pretty simple category. The iPad Air, you can get a 5G cellular connection on it. You can pay for an optional data plan if you want. And even though most people probably aren't going to opt for that, it is nice to have that option. And for a future world where you want to be constantly connected to the internet, I feel like these MacBooks should have 5G at this point. So that is a ding against the MacBook Air. On the iPads, you have the option to go cellular. On the MacBook Air, you don't. Now, in the past, there is a preconceived notion that iPads always got better battery life than their MacBook counterparts. However, that has really flipped since the introduction of Apple Silicon. The MacBooks have gone away from those power-hungry processors that would quickly drain the Mac's battery life. And even with the performance advantage of the M4 chip, it is still more efficient than the M3 chip found in the iPad Air. So not only is the chip more efficient on the MacBook Air, but it also has a larger battery. Apple put the MacBook Air rating at almost double the iPad Air's rating for battery life. And in my own use cases, I found that the iPad Air will last around 7 to 8 hours with mixed usage, while my MacBook Air can last around 10 to maybe 14 hours. So if you're looking for something that will last you through an entire day of use, carrying it through coffee shops, the airport, class, business meetings, there's no way around it. The MacBook Air has a big advantage here when it comes to battery life. Now, I think the top argument for a lot of people is going to come down to the pricing structure of these devices because they deliver value on a whole new level. Now, at first, you may think I'm talking about the 11-inch iPad Air. At face value, it is $600 for a very powerful computer that sure may not have a lot of advantages of the MacBook Air, but it's still a $400 cheaper device than this. However, there's some problems with this direct comparison because as a laptop alternative, Apple does expect you to use some accessories with this device. So if we add in that optional Magic Keyboard, well, you're looking at an additional $260 on this 11-inch Air. That brings the starting price up to $860. Still, it is $140 cheaper than the 13-inch MacBook Air. However, do not forget the Air only starts with 128 gigabytes of storage, where the MacBook Air has 256 gigabytes of storage. So if we match these products spec for spec, you're basically paying around the same amount for an 11-inch iPad Air as a MacBook Air, and that is without the additional 8 gigabytes of memory, which is impossible to get on the Air. The iPad Air. Furthermore, most people looking for a true laptop replacement will probably opt for the bigger 13-inch model that is closest in size to the MacBook Air. And that's the pricing where this larger iPad really starts to see that value drop, because even with the base 128GB configuration, it is $800, plus its Magic Keyboard is more expensive at $320. Add both of those together and you get $11,120 for this device, or $120 more than the base model M4 MacBook Air. Now, yeah, overall, these prices are very close to each other, and if you really want an iPad, the iPad Air is by no means the worst valued iPad you can buy, but when it comes to the value based on specs, the M4 MacBook Air this year, it's just unbeatable. Like, it's an unfair comparison. It delivers a full laptop experience and more memory for around the same cost as even the cheapest iPad Air with its Magic Keyboard. And to be fair, I didn't even add the additional costs of the Apple Pencil into this. So if you're an artist, you would have to buy this on top of it. Now, by far, the biggest deciding factor, even over price, is going to be which operating system do you prefer, iPadOS or macOS. And listen, I am in no way qualified to give you a winner here. I am not an official competition video making channel. I gotta call up the expert. That's right, you thought we didn't have him for this video. We got him. Hey Aaron, can you help me out with this video?
I'm so sorry, Greg. I cannot help you with your little video right now. I'm too busy building the dream smart bathroom with the ultimate toilet that can flush down any mud pie. You're gonna have to finish this video yourself.
Okay, I guess I'll have to answer this question myself. I'm an expert here. I can do this, okay? Listen, this is a very personal choice. One where in the past, I would probably give the winner to macOS based on it is just a more mature and more flexible operating system. You have a lot more choices with macOS. You have a desktop that you can fully customize. You have unlimited amount of windows. You can connect macOS to more external displays than you can iPadOS. It works with a wider range of audio accessories and other accessories. It has file systems that are much better than the iPadOS implementation of file systems. And I think the best way I can sum this up is that to make an iPad app, you have to do that on a MacBook. Like, you have to download Xcode and you can develop an app for the iPad. Whereas if you wanted to develop an app for the Mac, there's no option to do that on the iPad. Like, you can't code an app on the iPad for the Mac. So in those instances, I really feel like this is just a more mature operating system. There's a lot Apple has even added this year with the new version of macOS to add like window tiling by dragging it to the side, making window management easier with macOS Sequoia, and just a lot of features and workflows that I prefer on macOS, not to overcomplicate things. And iPadOS, even though there are some complex workflows here, like it does have a Files app, you can go into Stage Manager mode and get multiple windows. It is limited to like 4 windows, but you can get windows on the iPad, and you could do like split screen multitasking and stuff like that. It still is overall a much simpler user interface to use at the base levels. Like, almost everyone has a smartphone, and if you hand them an iPad, they probably know how to use it. But not everyone at this point has like a traditional PC. Like laptops and desktops are becoming rarer and rarer, where we live in a smartphone dominated world. So chances are, if I hand like a kid who's never seen like a PC before, has never worked on one, this laptop, they wouldn't know how to work it. But if I hand them an iPad, they know exactly what to do. They're swiping, they're touching on apps, they're opening things, right? So iPadOS is an easier operating system to work, but if you know how to use both operating systems, I think you get a lot more out of macOS. With that being said, I'm just gonna give it a tie. I'm gonna take the easy way out, because depending on what you want, whether that's ease of use or whether you have certain workflows that work better on the iPad, like again, if you're an artist and you're using drawing applications, that's gonna be better on the iPad. If you're a video editor and you're using like a lot of external storage, chances are there's probably an app better on macOS that's going to give you a more full-featured work experience. Now, even though I was fair, I think, and took that middle-of-the-road approach with the operating systems, we do have to pick a winner, and based on all these categories, the MacBook Air wins. Listen, this was just a knockout year for the MacBook Air. It deserves the win. Apple dropped the price, they doubled the memory. They did so much right with the MacBook Air. This is really a hard device to beat. It's a hard device to beat. The iPad Air, it just didn't get that big of an upgrade this year. It's just a chip upgrade from the M2 to the M3. They could have done a lot more with this to give it a fighting chance other than upgrading the chip and throwing in a new keyboard. However, I am also aware that while these devices are targeting similar everyday users and both can be used to get most of the same tasks done, they are both different from philosophical points of views. Just because I think one is a better value, this video at the end of the day is mostly for fun. If you need an iPad to do something on it, like draw or write, or you want a touch screen, or you want a device that you can use as a laptop or a tablet, nothing I say about the MacBook Air is really going to make you pick it over an iPad. So there's really no wrong choice here. But if you are someone that can use either of these devices and you are in between deciding on which one you should get, I think the M4 MacBook Air is the clear choice this year. All right, hopefully you found this video helpful and it helped you in purchasing a new iPad or a new MacBook, and hopefully you found it informative and fun. If you did, please leave me a like. If you want to see more, make sure you're subscribed. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you all in the next one. My job is done here. I'm retiring the microphone. Mr. Who's the Boss, you make the next video.